Hello, everyone. My name is Benson Kande, Executive Director, Eco Water Solution, Sierra Leone. I'm from Freetown, the capital city of Sierra Leone, West Africa. I want for Suna all, thank you for una come, and we're glad for Suna all.
Akory aby Yavrator Zona from Madagascar, tonga soa ton 2022 UNC Water and Health Conference. I work at CARE in Madagascar as the Deputy Chief of Party of the Rainwash Project funded by the USAID.
Comment vous allez? Vous écoutez la voix de Révérend Prince Badjenet. Je suis infirmier de profession et président de l'Association pour la santé et la prévention des maladies tropicales. Nous sommes dans la santé globale et le développement durable. Je serai personnellement en North Carolina pour Water and Health Conference. Je serai là pour le partage, pour apprendre et aussi partager notre expérience des défis que nous avons ici au Togo. Je vous souhaite à tous, à travers partout où vous êtes dans le monde, que ensemble, dans l'unité, nous ferons la synergie de nos actions. Que Dieu vous bénisse et à bientôt.
Salame, my name is Harsura Samuel. I work at CARE in Madagascar as the Behavior Change Senior Advisor of the Rainwash Project funded by USAID. Welcome to the 2022 UNC Water and Health Conference. This is my first time attending the conference, and I am excited to share the awesome work my project has done to improve water and sanitation access for rural communities of Madagascar. I also look forward to meeting new people and hearing about their experiences.
My friend, welcome to the 2022 UNC Water and Health Conference.
Hi everyone, my name is Patricia Damapula from the USAID Uganda Sanitation for Health Activity. I'll be attending the UNC conference for the very first time and I'm really excited. I can't wait to share with you experiences on our work in market-based sanitation, washing schools, and how we have used data to reverse and improve the wash situations in our communities. Looking forward to seeing you all.
My name is Harrison Mati, Country Director of Easy Water for Everyone. We are located in the heart of Accra with projects in Ghana, Senegal, and Uganda. In Ghana, we say Miramakwa, EBA 2022 Water and Health Conference in North Carolina. This is my first time attending the conference, and I look forward to meeting new people to share new ideas. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gideon Amano Jiagun, Officer in charge of water availability tracking for Easy Water for Everyone in Adan, in the Greater Accra region of Ghana. This is my first time of joining the UNC Water and Health Conference. I welcome you all. In the local language, in Dangwe, we say Nyeye Kabajehano UNC Water and Health Conference. I hope to share and learn more experiences from all of you. I thank you and welcome.
Hi, I'm Ruthie with Fresh Life and Sanity. Welcome to the 2022 UNC Water and Health Conference.
Everybody, I am Lalit Siriman Disanayaka, who is a chemical and process engineer. I am a private volunteer water technology and sanitation research officer. My mother country is Sri Lanka, the pearl of an Indian Ocean. My warm wish for UNC 2022 Water and Health Conference and wish it to be done successfully. Now I would like to wish by my mother language Sinhala. Mama UNC ජලායතනය මගින් පවත්වනු ලබන ජලය හා සනීපාරක්ෂාව සම්මේලනයට උණුසුම් සුබ පැතුම් පිරිනමමි. Last year was my initial online participation of your esteemed conference.
Hi everybody, my name is Rosie Curie. I'm the Managing Director for Aquatabs based in Wexford in Ireland. Aquatabs are taking steps today to ensure that everybody has access to the water they need tomorrow. This will be my 4th year attending the UNC conference and I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone back there in person. Enjoy the conference everybody, bye.
Hello, this is Jia Rahman from ICDDRB Dhaka, Bangladesh. I would like to welcome you all to the UNC 2022 Water and Health Conference. I'm very much excited because this is my first time participation to UNC, and I want to share my results to international scientists, international community, and I would also be very eager to meet with the scientists from different parts of the world. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Nanneke Nix. I'm from Amref in the Netherlands, and I work for the Finnish Mondial program in Africa. Welcome to UNC Water and Health Conference. This is the third time that I'm now joining this conference.
Hi, I'm Tariq Huda from ICDDRB, Dhaka, Bangladesh. Welcome to the 2022 UNC Water and Health Conference. I have been attending the conference since 2016, and this year I'm really excited to attend in person after virtually attending for the last 2 years. Thank you.
My name is Dr. Paula Wango. I'm the Chief of Party of USAID Western Kenya Sanitation Project in Kisumu, Kenya. Welcome to the 2022 UNC Water and Health Conference. This is my third time participating in this conference and the first in person. The last two occasions I did attend virtually. Most welcome.
I'm from Ethiopian Institute of Ethiopia, and I want to say welcome to the 2022 UNC Water and Health Conference for all of you. And I'm very excited to present my poster presentation, and I am expecting a lot of knowledge, skill, and experiences all over around the world. And thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Diana Kesiga. I'm from Uganda and I work for the USAID Uganda Sanitation Health Activity. This is my first time attending a UNC conference physically, but I also attended the conference last year virtually.
Hello and karibu sana kutoka Nairobi, Kenya. My name is Dennis from Sanaji and welcome to the 2022 UNC Water and Health Conference.
Hi, from the Flow Wash Epi team at the CDC in Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome to the 2022 UNC Water and Health Conference.
Hi, my name is Dennis Mwanza, and I'm the Chief of Party of a $40 million USAID funded gender transformative project in South Sudan, implemented by DT Global. I would like to welcome you to the 2022 UNC Water and Health Conference. Time to share, learn, and connect. Thank you.
Oh, hi, I'm Tate Rogers with Triangle Environmental. We're based just up the street here in Durham, North Carolina, and I want to welcome you to the 2022 UNC Water and Health Conference. This will be my 4th year in attendance, and we're very excited to finally be in person again to talk about WASH with our colleagues from around the world.
Bonjour, I'm Eric Viala, and I represent Communix International as Chief of Party of the USAID Rural Water Supply Activity in Tajikistan. Welcome to the 2022 UNC Water and Health Conference. This is my first year attending, but I'm excited that Communix is once again sponsoring this important event. I look forward to sharing experiences with colleagues from all over the world, so see you there.
Hello, beautiful people. This is Joseph Samchebu here. This is
Tyler Roy from Whitney Roy Partnership.
And I'm from Save Water Network. And we're currently in Kumasi, Ghana. And want to welcome you to UNC.
This is our first conference, both of us.
We are so excited about it. So
welcome.
Welcome, and I will say Akwaba.
UNC 2022 conference. Ẹ káàbọ̀ sórí ètò ẹ wá mu omi o, omi dára lára, omi la fi ń jẹ́ kí gíga, omi ló ń gbé gíga. Tójò bá rọ̀, gbogbo nǹkan ọ̀gbìn á yọ, á lè jẹun dáadáa. Ẹ máa mu omi dáadáa o, ẹ wá mu omi o. Water is essential to life. Welcome to the conference.
We'll bring up the lights, and I will also extend my warm welcome to each and every one of you. And if you're happy to be back in person, Let's clap for all the people who made it back. Yeah, so good morning to you all and good afternoon to some of you who are joining us virtually. And if you're staying up through the night in some parts of the world, we wish you a good evening. My name is Kata Lang and I'm the Director of Programs here at the Water Institute. And on behalf of the Institute and the Department of Environmental Sciences and Engineering in the Gilling School of Global Public Health at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, we welcome you back and it's good to have you here. We're so excited for the week ahead and we look forward to getting to know you better. And again, if you have any questions or comments and want to give me feedback, you can stop me in the hall and let me know. But again, we welcome you back here to campus after a few years of being virtual. What we can't do is share the great food and the buffet with our virtual guests, but over the course of my time here in North Carolina, I've discovered that Carolina's love language is food. And so on Friday, if you go home with a 3 to 5 pounds extra, we'll consider it a win. And you can consider yourself very welcome here and part of the family. So again, we hope you enjoy the week and all the services of the Friday Center and of the UNC campus. I did want to let you know that I will start each plenary with announcements and highlights of things that are happening during the day and over the course of the week. And so you'll have to put up with me for a few minutes at the start. And we also have a special announcement that will be made by one of our graduate students each day as a special shout out to their home country in their language. And so for all of you joining us from Indonesia, Sylvia will join us now and make a greeting to you all.
Thank you, Frida. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sylvia Landa, a first-year PhD student at Environmental Science and Engineering Department at Gilling School of Global Public Health here at UNC Chapel Hill. I'm from Indonesia, and I would like to welcome my colleague and friends who are joining the conference in person and online in my language. Selamat datang, selamat menikmati tahun 2022 Water and Health Conference di North Carolina. Dan saya sangat senang dapat bertemu dengan Bapak Ibu sekalian. Saya berharap konferensi selama 1 minggu ke depan dapat membawa pembelajaran yang berarti dan koneksi yang dapat dibangun untuk kebaikan di bidang air dan sanitasi. Jika ada pertanyaan dan dukungan yang dapat saya berikan, dapat menghubungi saya secara langsung. Oleh karena itu, sekali lagi saya ucapkan selamat datang. Welcome, enjoy the conference, and thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia, and also happy Diwali to all our folks joining us from India. A warm welcome also goes out to all the participants who are joining us online from Asia and the Pacific region. We want to welcome you virtually, and we're so glad that you've joined us. If you are joining us virtually, we wanted to let you know that there is translation service, and it will be in French, Spanish, and Portuguese. So thank you to Island Innovation and the Friday Center for making the virtual conference possible. And thanks to our conference sponsors for making it accessible to everybody around the world. Without you, it wouldn't have been possible. So thank you to all of those folks. I will be getting into the announcements. And so one, I wanted to let you know that you each should have received on registration your hard copy program. So if you wouldn't mind making sure that you've got your name on the front cover of your program, go ahead and write it now if you haven't already done so. Just because we only have one copy per person. And so if you lose it, you can maybe find it at the Lost and Found if you've got your name on it. Otherwise, you're going to have to use your smartphone and scan the QR code and download a copy of the program virtually. Also, I wanted to let you know that the plenary sessions will happen each day in this room, same time, same place at 10:30 every morning. So join us here for the plenary sessions. Today, we'll be talking about the current state and future trends of the WASH sector, moderated by Darren Saywell. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about driving WASH sector strengthening, developing capacity to innovate. On Wednesday, we'll have the current and future state of water and sanitation sectors in Haiti. On Thursday, we'll be talking about advancing the WASH agenda in 2023. And finally, on Friday, stick around because we'll have plenary sessions specifically looking at the White House, Congress, and the United Nations, a global pivot on water. So please stick with us if you can throughout the entire week. We've got a great lineup of plenary speakers for you. I also wanted to remind you that the conference dinner is on Wednesday evening from 6 to 8. Some of you are asking about how you should dress, and make sure you come dressed, but make sure that you don't need to get dressed or get fancy for it, just whatever you are wearing to the conference that day. And it will be in the Trillium Dining Room. And we'll have Maple View Farms ice cream. We'll have a band called the Unsustainables. And we'll have the Zoom Zoom photo booth. So please join us for an evening of fun and a light program on Wednesday evening. I also wanted to let you know that if you do lose something, then please check in with the front desk and we'll keep our eyes open for it. And you can always ask somebody sitting at the Water Institute table if you have questions, or if you've lost your way, or if you need something, we're happy to assist you. And please make sure you connect with us via the website and social media online. You can tweet us and we'll be retweeting throughout the week. And on Friday, we will be announcing the best tweet of the week. So make sure you stick around for that. But you can also scan QR codes at the Water Institute table for the abstract book, as well as the conference agenda and a link to the Water Institute's website. And, you know, we wouldn't be able to hold this conference truly without the generous support of our sponsors. And so big thanks goes out to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as our headliner sponsors, as well as to Comonix, Osprey, and World Vision, Aquatabs, P&G, Children's Safe Drinking Water, RTI International, Aqua Research, Tetra Tech, Easy Water for Everyone, Aquagenics, DT Global, Business Connect, Deloitte, IATMO, and DevWorks International. Their sponsorship allows us to keep the cost of the conference as low as possible. And again, it makes it accessible to everybody around the world, at least if you have some kind of internet access. And so thanks to all of our sponsors who make this conference possible. And so without further ado, I just want to say welcome back to campus. It's great to have you all back. We'll get to know you over the course of the week. And we've got an exciting lineup for you. And I will like to turn it over now to Dr. Erin Salzberg, the director of the Water Institute, to officially kick us off.
She makes this a tough act to follow. Welcome, everyone. It's great to see everyone. Great to see everybody in person. Great to get all the hugs and handshakes and just to be together again. And I really appreciate the effort everybody made to come here. Kata gave a shout out to our sponsors, and I know it may sound a bit trite, but I really do want to thank all of you because you're what made this meeting possible. You know, while our sponsors allow us to host this meeting, you're the ones who really bring the substance. And we've been able to build this program because of the effort that you guys have put into the events that we've got here, the verbal presentations, the posters, the side events, the tech shows, everything we've got is really owed to you. And so we really do appreciate it. I also really want to thank our colleagues who've traveled from all over the world to be with us this week. Travel has not been easy these days. Getting visas has not been easy these days, and nothing is cheap. And the fact that you decided to take your time and effort to be with us here today, that in many ways is also what makes this meeting work. You know, Kata and I were reflecting a little bit about this last week. And I think you all know the mantra for the Water and Health Conference, right? This is our raison d'etre. This is where policy, practice, and science come together, where we can collectively interrogate the science and evidence and use what we've learned to inform policy and practice. What we don't say, but is something that we and Kata in particular works very hard to ensure is every part of our program, is where this science and evidence comes from. And it really has to come from the field, and it really needs to come from all of your experiences. The indigenous knowledge, the experience of workers, better understanding of the behaviors, the prejudices, the systematic inequalities that impede our equity of access. These are the elements that really inform our work. And creating an environment where we can sit face to face now and share our experiences across the divides of race, culture, history, wealth, meritocracy, opportunity. This is what makes this meeting unique. And this is what we think you all bring to this meeting. I especially want to thank, we've had a lot of government colleagues here that have also joined us from Haiti, from Sierra Leone, Ghana, Uganda. I think I saw one from Cambodia. Incredible thanks to those people who've, again, taken their time from their really tough day-to-day jobs to be with us here today. And so while all of you may not see these themes reflected in all the titles of our sessions, in our plenaries, and our side events, and our talks, our hope is that they really run through all the discussions that we're having, and that we are asking ourselves the hard questions. Will this improve the lives of the most marginalized? Will this ensure equity and WASH access? Are we dealing with our partners respectfully and creating pathways to local knowledge, local ownership, and local leadership? Right. And this is what you guys are all bringing to this meeting. And so having all of you here is really what makes this better. In this regard, I really do want to give a special shout out to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Osprey Foundation, and World Vision, who enabled us to bring a lot of our international colleagues here today. Without their support, we could not have done that, and I really appreciate that. I also, after listening to the welcome messages this morning, want to thank USAID for the work they did to encourage their local partners to be here today and to bring that international experience to all of us here. Excuse me. I also want to thank the Journal of Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene for Development. In partnership with the journal for the first year, we're inviting the top abstract writers to produce a full publication that will be part of a special journal edition. And so we're really excited that this is another avenue for us to bring the lessons learned from this meeting out to the international community. So we're really excited about that. It's also why we're experimenting with the hybrid conference this year. As Kata mentioned, we have folks online. To our online participants, one, I know we haven't got this quite right yet. We haven't quite found a way to fully integrate our online audience into everything that's going on here today. It's a work in progress. We're getting there, and I promise we'll be better next year. And two, and you heard this in our welcome messages, so many people are here for the first time. Plan on coming here in person. Be here next year. It is Peter. I don't see Peter anymore. This morning he was telling me, look, it's the conversations we have in the hallways. It's the ability to engage our partners here that makes this meeting special. And you want to be here. This is the place where we can really talk and advance the work that we're talking about. In the past, we've opened this conference up with a land acknowledgement statement. And in the past year, I've learned a lot about these statements and the fact that they don't really reflect the true relationship between our Indigenous brothers and sisters and the land, nor do they really go far enough in recognizing that there are actions that we can and should be taking today to restore dignity, land, and opportunities to those that we've displaced or oppressed. Now, we all know it, but I want to acknowledge that while words matter, actions matter more. And in fact, even today, we're seeing a new wave of land grabs as countries work to secure rights to food and water, and that these displacements are continuing. And so with that in mind, I want to acknowledge that North Carolina is home to the Occaneechi, Lumbee, Kahari, Halawi Sapani, Eastern Band of the Cherokee, Meherrin, Tuscarora, Sapani, and Wakimashuan nations, along with many other Indigenous peoples living in both tribal, homeland, and urban settings. In fact, North Carolina has the largest population east of the Mississippi of Indigenous people. We acknowledge and give thanks to the First Peoples for this land and its descendants. It is also important for us to acknowledge and honor the crucial role that enslaved people have had in the early days of this campus and where we sit today. Enslaved people were sold as a cheated property to help fund the establishment of UNC, and the labor of enslaved people built UNC Chapel Hill and undergirded its operations until emancipation. We acknowledge and give thanks to the enslaved people who built UNC and their descendants. May we build upon their memories and goodwill of all who walked and labored here before us with truth, integrity, honor, and may we all commit in our own way to serve and restore dignity, land, and opportunities. Okay, we've got a great week planned for you. We have a great week planned for you. In fact, it's already begun. I saw some of the sessions this morning. It's really exciting. You've all know about our side events, verbal presentations, posters, and the happy hours, I'm sure. And I encourage you not to miss our plenary sessions. Kata mentioned them. We're going to be a bit policy heavy this year. Why? Thank you for asking, Ben. I appreciate that. Because for the first time in 50 years, for those of you who don't know, right, we will have the attention of world leaders focused on water. On March 2023, senior government officials will be meeting within the UN to discuss next steps towards accelerating action on water. On WASH, we all know that we were falling behind. Yes, no, we'll hear that soon. But we have an opportunity to change that and to build international support and consensus around game-changing ideas that can achieve meaningful results at scale. And we may not have that chance again for another 50 years. So this is really a unique time and a unique year. So that said, though, we're going to start the conference where we always do, and that's with the science and with the evidence. In about 5 minutes, we're going to invite up Darren Saywell, along with our panelists, who'll be walking us through the latest state of the world's water, sanitation, and hand hygiene reports. I don't think the state of the world's water one has been released just yet, so you're getting this all firsthand. Here today, are we beating New York? We're like a couple hours ahead of them, right? So is this the first public? Yeah, okay, so this is the first public session dedicated to the release of that report. So we're really excited to do that, and we're leading the discussions in the UN. So that's great to see. But it'll give you a sense of where we are as a sector, where we're falling behind, where are the gaps, and what are the recommendations that we need to work on to achieve universal access to WASH services. It's also your chance to comment and to contribute to our understanding of where we are today. On Tuesday, as Kata mentioned, we'll be focusing on capacity development and innovation, two of the accelerators from the SDG 6 acceleration framework that are often neglected and often not well understood. So hopefully some additional attention there will get us thinking about what we can do differently. On Wednesday, we're going to take a deep dive into Haiti. It's something that we were talking about. Kata deserves credit for the inspiration behind this idea. Could we dig more deeply into one country and the challenges that they face? Can we take a 30,000-foot view of how Haiti is responding to its WASH crisis and how they can build the systems that will provide sustainable services and support local innovation and encourage and support local leaders that can solve these problems. On Thursday, we're going to head back to the UN. In fact, we're going to bring the UN to us. We're going to be joined by many of the folks who are up in New York today and tomorrow who are talking, the preparatory meetings for this high-level event in 2023 are happening in New York today and tomorrow. We're going to actually be bringing some of those folks down here so that you can have a chance to engage with them firsthand about what the plans are for this 2023 event and how you can make a difference as a sector in what we're doing on water. You'll have a chance to hear on Thursday from the President of the General Assembly's office, along with other diplomats and representatives that are involved in that process. On Friday, as Kata mentioned, we're going to become a bit more parochial. We'll be focusing a little bit on what the United States is doing on water internationally. Why does this matter? Well, the US is spending a little over $1 billion a year annually on water. I don't know if that makes it the largest, but certainly one of the largest international donors on water issues. And if you haven't been paying too much attention, the White House recently released its new action plan on global water, and the US government just recently updated its US global water strategy. And so these two documents together are really going to define how the US is spending that $1 billion. And so this is our chance to meet with some of the people involved in that process, ask them why they made the decisions that they made, and how is this really going to make a difference in the world over the next 5 to 10 years? And so don't leave us. Friday is going to be an important day. So busy week. You've heard enough from me. Before I turn it over, I want to give a quick shout out to our students. You heard from Sylvia. Sylvia is one of my PhD students. She's a Fulbright. You're going to want to hire her in a few years. Don't hire her yet, please. I have many other students. In fact, we have many from UNC. Some are in the room. You can raise your hands. There's a some of mine in the back I recognize, some of the others I don't. Look, they're here in part because you've inspired their work, right? They're now dedicating their lives to this sector in part because of what you guys have done. They want to meet you. They want to talk to you. Say hi to them, be nice to them. Just don't hire them yet. I would appreciate that. Okay, but thank you again for all the support for the water and health and making this the meeting that it really is. I'm going to turn it over to Darren. Darren, I'm really glad you agreed to do this. Darren is the Senior Director of DAI's Global Water Security, Sanitation, and Hygiene Practice. And I'll let you introduce the panelists. And for folks online, just to let you know, use the Q&A function to ask questions, not the chat function. We want to let you guys chat as the session goes on. But if you use the Q&A function, we'll try to work those questions into the session. So thank you, everyone. I look forward to seeing you in the hallways over the coming week.
Thanks very much, Aaron. And at this stage, Kader and Aaron, are we aiming to do the meet and greet mingle? So I think the idea was that, you know, we're all back
Gracias. Y ahora nos vamos a juntar.
back in the same place again. And
Sí,
I think
vamos
we need
a
to make sure,
reunirnos una vez más.
perhaps we could
Y
make sure that the translation is
estamos
muted.
escuchando al.
Sorry about that. We'll figure out what's happening.
Okay, let's take two. What we're going to do is now we're all back together in real life, in large part in this room, but also online, is meet and greet each other and say hello to a colleague that perhaps is sitting next to you or behind you or in front of you, and just make sure that you know who they are. This is great that we're all back here now again. And let's make sure that we sort of make those connections. Whilst we're doing that, and I'm going to give you the go for that, I'm going to ask our panelists to come up, proceed up, and then we'll start the session proper. But if you could just turn to the person next to you, be nice to them, introduce yourself, say who you are. And if the panelists could come up, please. Mohammed, Melaku, if you could come up, please. Come up, please. Jonathan. Jonathan, can you come up, please? It's much better. Yeah. Okay, everybody. Now I'm going to try and get you back into the room in this conversation. Okay, everybody. That's it. Wrap it up. Wrap it up. Eyes at the front, please.
It really has been a long time, clearly.
I sort of knew there was some jeopardy in asking you to do that because you haven't seen each other for 3 years. So it's going to be difficult to get you to stop talking, but that's a great thing. That's why we're at UNC. I just wanted to add my own word of thanks to Aaron for inviting me to be able to do this. You know, it's a bit of a cliche that, you know, in life, there's 6 degrees of separation between people that you know. But I think it's a truism that in the WASH sector, it's only 3 degrees of separation. We're a tight, well-connected, well-networked group of people, and it is tremendous to be back in the same room with all of you. So I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to kick off the plenary session today, talking about the current state and future trends of WASH, which we will aim to do in 90 minutes, because that's very easy to do, right, in 90 minutes. But very glad that you'll be able to join us for this panel discussion. What I'm going to do is just offer some opening words, a little bit about the purpose of this session, and then We'll talk a little bit about the format, and I'll introduce the panelists. There's a particular sort of format that we're going through, and I'll keep you sort of abreast of where we are across that sort of spectrum. But in terms of the background for this session, and I know that Aaron talked about the major plenaries that we'll see during the week, I thought it's important that we kick off with this first sort of analysis of a sort of stock-taking exercise of where we are in the WASH sector. It helps set the scene for the rest of the week, I think, and it's an important sort of moment to draw a line in the sand of progress that we've made, sort of looking back, thinking about where we are, what level of traction we've got on universal access to WASH, and thinking forward about the next 8 years as we move towards 2030. So it's both a stock-taking exercise and it's a sort of forward projection exercise. It's a way for us to think a little bit about what we need to be doing differently in order to affect maximum change going forward. And what we thought we'd do is to use these 3 reports that UNICEF, WHO, and others have recently produced in the sector. These are respectively the state of ... reports, the state of drinking water, the state of sanitation, the state of hand hygiene. The state of drinking water is actually going to be released tomorrow. And these are reports that have, as I mentioned, sort of identified some critical gaps in terms of where we are across the sort of status of progress in those respective spheres. They offer a renewed call for action, I think. They also are going to act as Aaron was mentioning, as preparatory inputs for the 2023 UN Water Conference. So I think it's an important pivot point for us, and that's why we've staged it as the first of the plenary sessions, and it will feed into your thinking for the week going forward. We're going to review some of the findings from that report. We're going to talk about implications. We're going to hopefully have a good conversation amongst the panelists who are here for you today. So we were going to start, given that it's UNC, we were going to start with a tightly written 88 slide PowerPoint presentation, because we know how much you love PowerPoints, but we've decided to spare you from that. You will die from PowerPoint overexposure this week, but we'll save you right at the moment. Instead, we wanted to have a moderated discussion that's going to come in 3 phases. So this is the sort of format section. To begin with, we're going to have a little mini panel between myself and Clarissa and Anne, who were some of the contributing authors to those 3 reports that I just mentioned. That's where we want to get into the details of what's in those reports to bring everybody in the room up to speed. And then we're going to extend the panel to the remainder of our wonderful guests here and talk a little bit more about how we ground those recommendations and those findings into something that's tractable. Do they agree with what they're hearing from Anne and from Clarissa about the importance of those key messages? Why does that matter, and how do we try to do some of that translation on the ground? That's the second part of the panel. And then the third part is going to be where we come back to you. That's where we have the open mic session, not for any improv comedy session routines or anything like that, but sort of comments or questions, clarifications. We'll also at that stage, I think, Keda and Manal will take questions that are coming from the live stream as well. So there's an opportunity for our colleagues from afar also to contribute here. So that's a little bit of of how we're going to run this session, what we're going to do, what you can expect. I do hope that we'll be able to channel as much of the energy that we saw from some of those welcoming participants, particularly those 2 people sitting on toilets, into this session. You know you're at a WASH conference when a welcome video includes toilets from people saying their greetings. So without further ado, I think what we'll do now is we'll sort of transit to introducing the participants. I do need to give a heads up to the participants that there is jeopardy sitting in these chairs. They're very slippery. So if like me, where you're leaning into the conversation, be careful, because you may actually slip onto the floor. So there is a little bit of jeopardy that, keep you on your toes for when we get to that section. But what I wanted to do is just sort of run through the panelists now and say a few words about each. I'll start at this end and sort of move in a stepwise fashion. Clarissa Brocklehurst is well known to many of you. I was going to hesitate and say she's the grand dame of the WASH sector, but she's actually an affiliated adjunct faculty member at the Water Institute. She's well known in the sector. She has been contracted by UNICEF and WHO to work on these state of reports. And she's well known as a water and sanitation specialist with a particular emphasis on sort of policy debate and policy dialogue. In previous incarnations of Clarissa, she was Chief of WASH at UNICEF. She's been instrumental in the Sanitation and Water for All partnership and works with the unfortunately named Strategic Advisory Group of WHO UNICEF Joint Monitoring Programme. Next to her is Anne Thomas. Anne is a senior advisor for WASH at UNICEF. She leads the sort of global strategic direction and oversight of UNICEF's sanitation and hygiene programming. And prior to joining UNICEF, Anne held positions with IDRC, the International Development Research Center in Canada, World Bank, Water and Sanitation Program, Oxfam, and the Pan American Health Organization. Next to Anne is Mohamed Ba from Sierra Leone. He's the head of programs monitoring and evaluation with the Ministry of Water Resources in that country. Welcome. He's a WASH professional with a background in water management, governance, and information systems, and we're very lucky to have him with us today. Next to Mohammed is Jonathan Campata, a specialist in WASH, in water resources management, with experience in hydrology, water and sanitation utility management, strategic planning, and the like. And Jonathan was most recently, between 2017 and 2022, was the managing director of Lusaka Water Supply and Sanitation Company, which is the largest water and sanitation utility in Zambia. Next to Jonathan, we have Malaku. Now, Malaku told me that he wanted to be known only as Malaku. So I'm just going with that, a little bit like Cher wants to be known as Cher. Malaku is Malaku, but Malaku is currently an advocacy coordinator on the USAID Ethiopia Transform WASH project, where he facilitates multi-stakeholder platform dialogues around the issue of market-based sanitation, so information and experience exchange on that subject. But in a previous life, worked in irrigation management and soil and water conservation. And then last but not least, Caroline van der Voorden, rounding out our panel. She's the Deputy Chief of Party for USAID's WASH Partnerships and Learning for Sustainability, WASH PALS, working with Tetra Tech. And she's responsible for providing technical and managerial oversight of the implementation research agenda and leads on the area-wide sanitation research. And Caroline and I used to work together in a previous life when she was at the Water Supply and Sanitation Collaborative Council, and she was the lead of the technical support unit there. So I hope that what you can see from this group is that we've got a really interesting set of panelist profiles here. I think we've got people well-versed in policy dialogue, both at the national and at the international level. We have people who've worked in the big picture advocacy side of things, and also at the sort of smaller but as equally important advocacy direct with stakeholders in country. We have across this panel a really excellent wealth of experience in programming and the insights that it takes to actually move the needle. So I think that we'll have a really good discussion as we move into the bulk of our thinking here. So that's the introductions, right? Now we can sort of start to think about this first part of the panel, which is going to be this sort of small conversation, if you like, to set the scene that we wanted to have with, in particular, with Clarissa and Anne, as I mentioned, as contributing authors for these state of the art in water, sanitation, and hand hygiene reports. And I guess that what we wanted to do to sort of get us thinking about this was obviously get the microphone up off the floor, but if we could start, Clarissa and Anne, with the sort of, I guess it's a little bit like the softball question, right? If you could talk us through a little bit the genesis and the rationale for these reports, I think that would be really good. It helps for those of you in the room who haven't had a chance to look through those reports. It helps to understand where they come from, what some of the rationale was. It also perhaps helps to situate those reports across the sort of plethora of other documents out there. Where do they sit in the ecosystem of policy and program and advocacy documents? And why do you think they matter? Why do they differ?
So let me kick off there and say that the first of the three reports started out, this was before the whole series was even envisaged. And the first report was the State of the World Sanitation Report, and it came about because of strong interest from a UN member state. So the government of Singapore was very interested in being a champion for sanitation within the UN system and proposed to do an event specific at the UN on sanitation. And UNICEF came up with the idea that it would be good in order to set a context for this event to write a State of the World Sanitation Report. That was back in 2020. This was all pre-pandemic. So UNICEF then approached WHO, and the two organizations did this report in partnership, and I was involved in that right from the very beginning. And the decision was made to use the SDG 6 acceleration framework, which is something that UN Water has put together. And it worked really well as a framework. The other thing that came out very strongly from that report, that the theme of government leadership was very strong. And this was partly because the participants in that event, to be chaired by the government of Singapore, would all be UN member states. So we wanted a report that spoke directly to governments and said, this is what you need to do about sanitation. The report drew on all the existing data. So we drew on JMP data and GLASS data, but other data as well. And it included a lot of case studies, all positive case studies of examples where governments had been able to bring about change, often with the support of development agencies, but always government-led. And these were very positive stories. They were stories of success. And then the following year, we were in full pandemic mode by that time. And the idea came out to do a State of the World's hand hygiene. And that's where Anne comes in, and Anne was the champion of that. So maybe I'll pass over to
Right. So State of the World hand hygiene came about at this moment when there was so much attention on hand hygiene globally. And it was unprecedented in many ways, how countries had included hand hygiene as a central pillar of COVID response strategies. And the Hand Hygiene for All initiative had started between WHO, UNICEF, the World Bank, WaterAid, and a number of other influential sector partners. And I think what we wanted to do was, one, recognize what all these governments had been doing on hand hygiene, but also not lose what we felt was sort of a generational moment to enshrine these commitments and action into public policy. And so the State of the World's Hand Hygiene report was really something we were trying to help vision what universal hand hygiene might look like in the public policy realm for governments. And again, we staged this around Global Hand Washing Day in 2021 to set the bar higher in terms of what governments could do.
So that's sanitation and hand hygiene. So tell us more about.
So then, of course, it
drinking water.
became obvious that we had to do a third one, that we needed to do a third one on State of the World's drinking water. And again, WHO and UNICEF decided they wanted to work together again, WHO this time in the lead. And the decision was made to also invite the World Bank to come in, because the World Bank was playing such a strong role already in the water supply policy arena. So then that report, as I think you mentioned, it's going to be launched tomorrow. Everybody here will get a sort of sneak preview of it, or a very quick preview, because it's there's going to be a side event on Thursday, at which, in fact, some copies of the report will actually be available. But the three reports together now, with this sort of compelling storyline, all the reports are structured in the same way by the SDG 6 acceleration framework. They now become an ideal input to the preparation for the water conference in 2023 that Aaron mentioned at the beginning. So that'll take place on World Water Day in 2023. It will be a high-level event at the UN in New York. So the three reports together, because they're structured in the same way, they have a very strong underlying theme of what government leadership would look like. They tell a compelling story, and they will be an input to the 2023 conference.
Thanks. I think that sort of helps situate these reports. You mentioned something that colleagues in the audience may not be fully aware of, the acceleration framework. Could you just briefly talk to that?
Yeah, I can just, the acceleration framework has 5 accelerators in it. And so the accelerators are, and I always forget one of them, so please prompt me. So it's governance, which includes policy, finance, data and information, capacity development, and innovation. Look, I got all 5.
Wow.
Yeah, okay.
Great.
And it's great because it's a good framework because I certainly found when I was working on the reports, it means that you don't leave anything out.
Yeah.
You tackle all the really difficult subjects. You tackle some of the
Okay.
the subjects that get less attention.
These themes, those 5 themes, are things that we'll likely come back to as we move into the second part of this discussion. And one of the opening questions in that second part is for our colleagues, beyond Anne and Clarissa, is, well, what have you picked up? What have you heard from these reports, and what does it mean to you? So that's just a reminder that our other colleagues will be commenting a little bit on what we're hearing here. So we've situated these reports, but I guess the next obvious question is, well, so tell me more about the sort of key messages. What, if you can distill this, right? There are 3 big reports, but for the benefit of this group, what would you say are the the most important things, most important messages that are coming from that? And why does it matter for the sector?
So I think, rather than going into the details of each of the report's recommendation, I think just generally as a framing issue, the reports essentially boil down to targeting the policy environment as a real game changer in terms of accelerating progress toward universal access to water, sanitation, hygiene. And that explains the targeting of the messages toward government in particular and policymakers. I think what we wanted to do was show that where we've seen the biggest progress in the world in countries like India and Indonesia and in Nigeria, that this is always coming from leadership right at the top. And so we wanted to sort of frame the real acceleration and the acceleration framework as coming from governments themselves. For state of sanitation, there was a strong emphasis on that political leadership to drive the foundational shift that we felt was needed. Things like stronger institutional accountabilities, reduced fragmentation, the need for more comprehensive policies that address the full value chain of sanitation, and correspondingly better financing strategies that also address this. And we also wanted to really drive home the message that, this was an issue of government accountability and leadership, and it was as much for rural sanitation as it was for urban sanitation, that we needed that government responsibility and ownership of the issue. For state of hygiene, this was really a fresh take on hand hygiene because it really helped frame issues from a policy perspective and not from a practitioner's perspective. So, looking at those 5 accelerators, what are the essential elements of a policy framework that would underlie universal hand hygiene? So what do the data systems look like? How do they inform policy? What kind of policies do you need? What kind of leadership do you need in the government? And what is the role of the private sector, for example, in enabling innovations to achieve universal access to hand hygiene services across multiple settings? So I think, the documents gave us an opportunity to have a fresh look at what universal services look like, but really unpacking that into meaningful messages for government.
And I would just say, one of the things I don't think we have to bore this audience with is the fact that the data all tell us that there's this huge section in each report that lays out where we are in terms of progress, and the news isn't good. We need to vastly scale up progress. And the reports also make the economic case why it's so important to improve all of these 3 things: drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene, what the impacts are on economies. But I think you all know that. We don't need to tell you that. And it was more that the recommendations then tried to relate back to how you fix each one of these problems.
Great. So I hope that what you're seeing is that we're sort of getting into more and more detail here. We've talked now a little bit about some of those broader themes, the sort of direction of travel. You've talked about sort of policy targeting and improving governance. I wondered whether, for my next question for both of you, if you could pull out specific recommendations that you think were critical or important or novel or different within these reports, and talk a little bit about, If the focus is on those particular recommendations, are there things from your perspective that might still be missing in terms of these reports? So yeah, wanted to hear your perspective on that.
So the report that is still top of mind for me, because I've only just finished working on it, is the state of drinking water. So maybe I'll talk to that and can talk to the others. But all of them called for a strong policy environment, and particularly for both sanitation and water, a strong regulatory regime. And for governments in particular, in the case of water supply, to improve the health of utilities, to look at the service providers and what sort of policy environment service providers need to be able to thrive. For instance, we illustrated this with a case study from Vietnam, where a water operator partnership with a Dutch utility had helped the Da Nang water utility triple its net revenues by addressing things like non-revenue water and things like that. I think one thing that's important to note from all three reports is that the general recommendation is that you shouldn't worry about what technology gets used. Governments should not be prescriptive as to technology. They should set criteria for performance and look to what service providers, public, private, small scale, large scale, formal, informal, can provide those services, and that allows new technology and new ways of doing business to come into the sector. So creates an environment that encourages innovation.
And I think I'll focus on the part of the question about what's different about the reports and maybe what's missing, looking towards UN 2023. I think each of the reports sort of reflects the maturity of each of the sectors. So when we look at hand hygiene, we're advocating for hand hygiene to have a policy home. So we're not talking about the quality of the policy yet. We're just saying it needs to be embedded in policy, and here are some potential ways of doing it. I think for sanitation, a lot of the policy recommendations are around the quality of policy and the quality of leadership and accountability frameworks. And so it's a bit more specific. And of course, when we get to water supply, it's really much more specific in terms of regulatory frameworks and very specific actionable items, reflecting the fact that it's probably the most mature of the three sectors. But with that said, that's not to say that there isn't a role for regulation in the other two. Of course, they're there, but I think we were looking at the state of where we are right now. What are the most important recommendations? But in terms of what's missing from the three reports, we could look at things like the climate angle that we didn't stress as much in the reports. And that may be something that we want to focus on as we look toward the water conference next year. What do we need? I think the other thing is, this is very much focused on governments, of course, because that was our audience in terms of global advocacy. But there is an implication in terms of external support agencies and how do we work? How do we respond to this challenge of system strengthening? How do we change the way we internally work to support governments? And how do we align ourselves as a sector, with that ambition of triggering this kind of catalytic and accelerated action from governments?
Thanks very much. And I'm hoping that particular theme, the sort of incentives for institutional behavior change, might be something that we revisit in the wider panel, or perhaps even, with questions from colleagues in the audience. My last question in this first part was going to be around, we've mentioned it a couple of times already, but this high-level UN Water Conference next March 2023. How do you think the findings could begin to influence action on the ground or new policies? How might they be a primer, if you like, for the work that's going to be going into that UN conference next year?
So I think the advantage of these three reports is it sets all the most recent data, but within a context of a way forward, with a clear set of recommendations. The reports are divided up into 6 chapters, and chapter 6 is the recommendations, and basically it's about half of each document. So the documents are very policy recommendation, way forward heavy, but then it lays out all the data and the economic arguments. So that's all at the fingertips. We don't need to argue. We don't need to have any arguments about that. It it contains these very positive and inspiring case studies. In each case, a good example of the government taking action. But I think also, to come back to what Anne just said, it also makes clear the implication for development partners is that development partners need to be part of the process by which we build capacity within government to respond to these challenges. So much more behind the scenes work, working indirectly, not working so much directly in service provision itself or implementation, but working to support governments with governments in the lead. And I think that's an important message to bring into the 2023 conference. The reports also recognize that the amount of money that's coming in through things like donor contributions, even though they can be extremely catalytic, are a very small part of the overall financial flows into the sector, into the three sectors.
So maybe just a final point to say that the state of sanitation document, it influenced UNICEF in a big way, actually, to look at how we were doing our sanitation programming. And over the course of the last year, we've been developing what we're calling the UNICEF game plan to reach safely managed sanitation, which is basically mirrored around the recommendations of the state of sanitation report and structured around the 5 pillars of the accelerator framework. And it's really a shift in our approach toward the system strengthening approach, but it unpacks it a little bit further to look at, what are those foundational interventions that we could support at country level? How do we work in partnership with other organizations to affect the change we want? And also to articulate what would success look like, in this new paradigm of system strengthening. So that's one very sort of operational thing that's happened for state of sanitation from our perspective. A second is on the hand hygiene side with WHO, we're working on a set of normative guidance that would look at, what would it take to actually achieve these minimum standards for hand hygiene in different settings, looking at it, from a supply chain perspective, from a programming perspective, from a policy perspective, and to get that even more granular piece of guidance out there to governments. And additionally, sort of tracking now, a policy framework tool, a hand hygiene policy framework analysis tool that we have as well with WHO that's helping us look at the advances that governments are making in the policy environment for hand hygiene. And all of these are based, again, on the accelerator framework. So I think they provide really great traction in terms of getting people on the same page and aligning on a certain direction. And I think just the final point on the water conference, I think also the framework provides a really great sort of framing for collaborations within the sector. And I think the hope is that partners come together at the water conference next year with commitments to support governments. And so again, I think this idea of alignment is really important as we go into the water conference next year.
Great. Thanks, Clarissa. And I mean, so I think that what I hope you've heard there are some important pointers towards sort of genesis of these reports, where they've come from, why they matter for the sector, what some of the broader messages are, what are the themes that are out there. Some of those we've heard before, let's be frank, but I think you've put a newer emphasis and a newer spin on some of those. And then latterly, we're just talking much more directly about some of the more tractable recommendations. Now, we've got some of those. We're going to sort of parlay those into the next part of this discussion, and then how we can use this in other events that are happening in the coming year. So we wanted to use that first part, setting us up for the second part of the discussion, which is why I'm going to turn now to the wider panel, and wanted to start actually with Caroline, all the way over there at the other side of the panel. Hi, I can hardly see you with these glasses, but from what you've heard from Anne and Clarissa about these reports, I wondered if you could, sort of give us your perspective, the benefit of your perspective. Where do you see some of the added value? You've worked in this space internationally within the UN system, so that's why I'm turning to you first. I wondered whether you could give us a little bit more of a perspective of where you think they could add value and why, and the like.
Thanks, Darren. Thanks, Anne and Clarissa, for introducing it all so well. So Clarissa made the point that one of the main reasons they were published and they were published now is because of this upcoming conference and the focus on global leadership. To me, these are very important advocacy tools, as much for the advocacy that needs to happen much more locally. So many of the key decisions that need to be made concerning the WASH sector are actually not going to be made in the WASH sector. We are not the people making those decisions. We need to convince other people in other ministries, in other departments, other sectors to make decisions that will influence the progress we can make in ours. We had a session about capacity development and the human resources needs and gaps in sanitation and hygiene earlier today. And the very first message there is local government positions need to be created. Someone needs to pay for those staff positions to be there. We can capacitate and train as many people as possible, but if there's no jobs for them, the key decisions behind it aren't decisions that can be made by the WASH sector. They need to be made in the, much higher up in finance departments, etc. So to me, these kinds of tools are key to situate the messages that need to be given to leadership at every level, in countries as well. So they're just really nice, concise reports that, hand you the recommendations and the messages you need to advocate sort of very easily for you to translate them into your own context. And for me, the other point is, and you just said, there are things in there that aren't new, and you're right. But I do feel very optimistic about the fact that more and more we're speaking as development partners and donors and INGOs and etc. We're speaking more and more the same language of what seem to be the key issues that need to be addressed, particularly in this system strengthening era. And it comes back to Anne's point about alignment and harmonization. And the more key agencies start using the same frameworks,
right,
and the accelerated framework is now being used as sort of the key framework in many strategies and policies, the better that will be, because we will all start working more and more in the same way towards the same goals. And so even that comes in handy at the local level, where you need to start planning how you do your system strengthening at the local level, because you can use the same pillars.
Right. So thanks. I mean, I think the message there for me is about common entry points, a little bit of a common language, a common framework. This is what allows us to talk across different sectors to influence in a different way. Same question to you, Malaku. Wonder whether on what you've heard from Anne and Clarissa, where do you see the value of these reports? How do you think it will make a difference in your own country?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's nice reports, especially I would like to underline the part which talks about the capacity building. So for instance, in Ethiopia, if you talk about capacity building, especially with the government, yeah, they're much more interested in installation of infrastructures rather than in spending money with regards to capacity building. So it's been a challenge to even formalize an institution which works with the capacity building initiatives. For instance, there is one good institution organized, which we call it a One WASH national program, where donors have pooled funds, and at the same time, capacity building activities are being advocated through those institutions. So that institution can also use this report in order to continue and really do much on these things. And the other issue is that the private sector. So yeah, still infrastructure installation is done by the government and also by NGOs, but the private sector is not yet coming into the picture because there is no as such policy support, but there are some, of course, beginnings, but we are not seeing, big intervention by the private sector, especially with the water supply part. So that will, definitely help in shaping the policy. And we also have this institution called the Multi-Stakeholders Forum, which has been conducted every year in Ethiopia. So at the end of that forum, they come up with some kind of undertaking. So if we can be able to really convey this message through the multi-stakeholder platform in Ethiopia, that could also be incorporated in the policy level. So I hope this is very interesting for me. Thank you.
Thanks. I think that sort of helps give a little bit more details to some of those common entry points that Caroline had identified. So that's a little bit the sort of rejoinder on what the two of you had heard from Clarissa and Anne. I wanted to ask Mohammed and Jonathan the same question, but slightly different framing. So in these reports, there are, as we've mentioned, varying degrees of granularity around recommendations. I wanted to ask you flatly, sort of which of those recommendations resonated with you? Did the recommendations resonate with you? I guess is the sort of broader question. So could you talk a little bit about that? We'll ask Jonathan to start and then Mohammed to follow up.
Yeah, thank you. From the recommendations, I think what came out, I think maybe we can say top, is the recommendation on governance. I think we've got a saying that WASH is everybody's business, but who is actually responsible? So there's a lot of fragmentation. If you look at the WASH responsibilities, I think right from local communities, the local authorities, agencies like the health, they're all responsible for WASH, but there's need for strong leadership. But that leadership should be good leadership. So that translates now to the issues of really having the good governance in place. Because once you've got good governance, I think the pieces will fall in place in terms of the other actors to follow and be aligned to specific vision and the direction. There's a lot to be done in the WASH sector. And I think it would be good now to bring into context in terms of each local area, that's at country level, what are really the priorities? Because even the resources to implement everything is quite scarce. So we need really to have those gains that are going to have multiplier effects. So by having that good governance and that leadership coming from the government, government will be able now to galvanize the private sector, the cooperating partners, the local authorities, and the communities to work together. One area where I did not see very strongly in the recommendations is the issue of how can we use the different networks that are coming on board. There may be formal networks or informal networks. And I think I'm thinking about in Zambia, where we're starting in the capital city, we've got what we call the Lusaka Water Security Initiative. And this is a network driven mostly by the private sector, who have actually realized that poor WASH services is a risk to their businesses. Thank you.
I'm going to ask the same question to Mohammed, but again, slightly frame it slightly differently. So of those tangible recommendations, this was particularly in the drinking water report, did anything resonate with you? But to also be slightly controversial, is there anything that you disagree with flatly in the reports? I mean, one of the things I think that Anne and Clarissa wanted to make sure is, are we capturing the right messages going forward into this high-level UN water conference in 2023? So is there anything that you felt wasn't framed the right way? That would be interesting for us to hear from your perspective in Sierra Leone.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for the authors of the report. For me, I want to thank you for the way you structured the report. It's the 5 thematic areas you look at, the governance, financing, innovation, and other areas, which is very good. And sorry. If you look at the report, especially in the governance, for me, it's really good. And the way the messages were put into that, I think we need to look at it keenly. One of the things, like when we talk about independent regulatory agency, when we use those words, yes, government always say, okay, this institution, this agency is independent. But sometimes the president or the minister appoint the head of that institution. So how independent that institution is. So we need to look at those words when we are putting our recommendations, because we normally say, this is what we do. The government say, okay, we are doing this. We have set up the agency is operating. It's independent. How independent it is. So that's one, for me, I think we need to look at those messages, those words that we use from the recommendation, because we can easily escape from those words. Yeah. And also in the governance, as my colleague Wright said, we always say performance and improvement is possible when leaders are willing. And governance is something that is very tricky. And if you look at like water sector in Sierra Leone, we have a lot of water based on assumption. We have 6-month rain. But we suffer for water so much because of governance issues. So it's something that when we are putting recommendations, we need to put a strong recommendation that with a clear message, with a clear framework that will really for us not to escape along the line. Because sometimes when we have those recommendations, as we look at the way that we can escape, we easily escape, say, oh, no, we have done this. So as we put recommendation for the UN, let us also be mindful that let us put a strong message that will really capture everything, not for us to escape from that truth. So those are the things for me, I think I will say for now for the recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Mohammed. So I think that sort of takes us into, I'm going to jump forward to the last question here, because I think what we've been talking about from Jonathan, Mohammed, and from Malaku is about preconditions, conditions for success to be achieved through these recommendations. And that makes me think about what's missing in the report. Caroline, I was going to ask you to see, you know, from your perspective, are there things that you feel are missing still in the report that might be useful for our colleagues here to work on? I wanted also to bring Anne and Clarissa back in at this stage to see whether there were other things, you know, from being very close to the text, there are other things that you feel you need to accentuate in the next year or so as you prepare for the UN conference. So Caroline, if we could start with you in terms of gaps and missing links.
So maybe not missing, but more detail, I guess. And one interesting thing that struck me when I was looking at the water report now, with the executive summary we got to get a sneak peek of, was that the recommendations are much more concrete. And I think partly that's a function of the fact that the water supply sector is ahead if you compare it to sanitation and hygiene. And so it's easier to make much more concrete recommendations on what the gap still is or what needs to be done. For sanitation, we're so far back still. So to ground those recommendations and make them concrete actions is going to take some translation that needs to happen at the country level. But what I was saying earlier about more and more of us sort of speaking the same language and pushing the same messages, I think we can be more specific, even within sanitation, on exactly, you know, what kind of policies we'd like to see, what needs to be in there around safely managed sanitation, for example, but also around that real push for universal services. And I think that's probably another thing where maybe in terms of gaps, or where I feel the research needs to, or the evidence needs to help us further, is really that balance between reaching scale and reaching universality. And it's not the same thing. Programming at scale still leaves people out. And we've been, you know, together, I wouldn't say systematically, but we have over the years been leaving communities and populations out from the way we program, the way we plan, and to work towards area-wide and universal coverage planning and coordination and resourcing perspective and needs more thinking on how that gets done. And to a certain extent, it maybe is a different way of programming too, in terms of spending more time earlier on when you're designing your local government plans and systems, but also when you design your programs as development partners, understanding what the different needs and requirements are for the different population groups that you hope to serve. Because otherwise we keep on leaving the same people out at the end.
Great. Thank you. I wanted to see whether any of the other panelists wanted to add something in this question before we go into the third part of our panel. Anything from Clarissa or Anne, or from Mohammed, Jonathan, Malaku? Malaku?
Yeah, one thing that I'm not quite sure about the report is with regards to this market-based sanitation. I mean, So in Ethiopia, we have tried our best to minimize this open defecation. So a lot has been done, and we have now moved towards, so the improved sanitation can be achieved through the market-based sanitation. So I'm not really quite sure how detailed the report is talking about that, about the market-based sanitation.
Okay.
I have a whole list of things that I think were missing from the reports because there were things that we would have loved to have gone into while keeping the report short enough that anybody at the UN might read it. And I think one of the challenges here is how you take these very general recommendations and apply them to a local context. Because of course, what you have to recognize is that every single member state who will read these recommendations is at a different stage. And there are recommendations in the reports that apply to every single country, including the United States, including Canada, where I'm from. And then there are other recommendations that would be very difficult for some countries to be able to implement right now. So there's a huge challenge there to bring it all down to a sort of realistic level at the local level. I think that one of the big things that we don't have is good ways to measure some of these things. So if, we've been very good at measuring things like numbers of toilets and numbers of hand pumps and numbers of people served, but we're far less good at measuring things like the workforce, and Caroline was talking about this early in a session earlier today, or what makes a good quality policy. When is a policy a good policy? And this issue of regulation, independent regulation, do we set that as the sort of the holy grail, that's what we want, or do we want regulation just to be as independent as possible within the context of a political reality? And we're not very good at setting up good metrics for those things.
Okay, I'm going to suggest that we move into the third part, which is a little bit more interaction. I believe there's one question for the panel from the live stream.
There's one question about how are you going to measure whether the reports are actually making a difference? The reports themselves are influencing policy.
So for those who couldn't hear, the question is, how can we measure how these reports are making a difference? Are they influencing policy? Are they influencing practice? How do we know? I'm going to look to the panel to see whether any of them want to take that on. But for you in the crowd, there are mics at the side, one on my right, one on the left. This is your moment. If you wanted to ask a question, we've got 5 or 10 minutes or so to have some Q&A with the team here. So please let us know if you want to come up and ask a question. But who wants to tackle that at the? Oh, Jonathan is wants to have a willing crack at that. How do we know whether these types of reports have an influence on policy or practice?
Yeah, I think the first thing was indicated that the reports are generic, so it would be important to localize them because each country has got a different situation. So by localizing them, we need to have action plans in place, obviously, to outline the measures want to implement. Bear in mind that our endpoint is to have universal coverage and access for water. So from there, definitely, we'll come up with some targets and indicators that will show us where we are at each point. But more importantly, I think, is the acceleration of our actions. I think it's no longer business as usual. We don't have the time to waste anymore. So that's also links to the issues of financing, innovation. So this whole integrated approach, really, to implement the action is something that has to be actually undertaken. Thank you.
Okay, so Jonathan's advocating for a tractable plan that has, different stakeholders aligned around it. And do you want to have a pop at this question?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is $1 million question. It's not just about the state of sanitation reports, but it is how as a sector do we measure incremental progress that is being made through, the contributions of the sector to support governments, but also by governments themselves. And I think I mentioned a couple of the tools, the hand hygiene accelerator framework tool, which WHO and UNICEF is using to actually track how governments are moving forward with some of those recommendations. Our game plan for UNICEF is also going to be having its own monitoring framework to look at how governments are making incremental progress. But again, I think the bigger question is how as a sector are we doing that? And I think the conference next year is a great opportunity for that. And I think one of the criticisms of the WASH sector that often comes from my health colleagues is that we're too complicated. We have so many recommendations across so many subsectors, and we don't have a sort of unifying sort of agenda as a sector. And I think that might be something, I think, building on Caroline's comment about having more actionable, points to this agenda would be really helpful. So if, going into UN 2023, we have, a 10-point agenda for WASH that we can then measure and hold governments to, maybe something to be thinking about as a sector. How do we simplify this into an actionable framework?
Great, thank you. I wanted to check whether the people standing up by the mics wanted to ask a question. Not that I'm going to put you on the spot, lady in the red top, making notes furiously, but since nobody else wants to ask a question, perhaps you can ask a question. Okay, let me just see. Well, excellent. We have a taker on the left-hand side who's shaming this right-hand side of the auditorium. So you guys get in gear. If you could just introduce yourself and who your question is for, please. If it's a question or if it's a comment.
Yeah, it's a question. Kellogg Schwab, Johns Hopkins University, and maybe it's a follow-up to the discussion we just had in the end. And the idea here is we've got these great reports out there, and what I just heard is true. We're still siloed. We still make these reports in there at the individual kind of needs, water, sanitation, and hygiene. How do we get into a systems approach to this? So the Agenda for Change and other ones are really pushing that, from the beginning, we need to integrate this in a way that we can have scalable and sustainable solutions, and we can't solve them at each time just doing hand wash, just doing. Is there a method that we can integrate this in, maybe learning from other sectors that had to work on this? And there's some that for HIV/AIDS and others that really started putting communication and behavior change front and center, not just doing all the metrics, which we know we're in a world of hurt. If we're going to hit it by 2030, what can we do to really push this and leverage it to go forward?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to suggest we take another question and then come back to the panel with whoever wants to be brave enough to respond to it. So again, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Sure. I'll take this off for a second. Hi, my name is Amari Walker. I'm actually at RTI. I'm an environmental engineer and analytical chemist, so I'm slightly a little out of place with this conversation, but I kind of wanted to hear more from Clarissa on her short list of things that she wished were included in that framework. I'm speaking because I realized that also Anne pointed out that climate wasn't integrated as much, or wished there was more put in there, but I'm also curious about, was there plastic pollution included into that water planning, or what else was on your list that you feel like wasn't able to be included?
Thanks. So let's see, I mean, there's a specific question there for Clarissa and her long list, but does anybody else want to take the first question about how do we think more about a sort of systems methodology and a systems approach? How do we trigger that, integrate it? Is that something you want to have a go at, Erin?
I'll have a go. I don't have the full answer, but I'll have a go. No, I think the start is actually look at best practice. There are countries that have done it. And for me, one that comes to mind and was also in the reports is Nepal as an interesting case where it showed that government leadership in planning and coordination did really bring together many sector players around that system strengthening agenda, and much clearer division of roles between those involved in working in the sector, both on the systems strengthening at the local at the government level. And a lot of that came back to the fact that government put in place, coordinating mechanisms for sanitation and hygiene. But then it also really gave much more clear direction to the development partners and the role they needed to all play in terms of capacity development, in terms of actual rollout of programming, in terms of where finances were needed, in terms of how to reach that last mile. I think the nice thing about this report is it doesn't just lay out the somewhat lamentable state of the sector, but it also does actually give, some of the positive deviance that did bring us together around that agenda for change.
I see, Mohammed, you want to add something to that, and then we'll come to Clarissa. I'm sorry, I think we'll probably have to cut the questions at that point because there's still another section that we need to work on. So, Mohammed.
Yes, with regards to his question on what can we do, I think we know the answers to that question, but the challenge we are having is two things. One, we are not following the rules, and two is attitudinal change. We have some countries that have already have reached a point which we can learn from to really address the challenges we have from the developing countries. But those two things that are really affecting us. So if for us to reach that point, we need to change our attitude, one, and also follow the rules. We have laid down rules, recommendations, we follow those rules. When we follow those rules, we'll make sure that we implement everything to the better for our people. Then we can achieve that. So that's the only way for us if we want to achieve, we can go forward.
Thank you. So, Clarissa, I'm going to ask you to respond on the short list, and then I want each of the other participants to give us one key takeaway in one brief sentence so that we can sort of wrap up the panel.
Sure, and I'll answer. That's an excellent question. I'll answer it very, very briefly. There were lots of other things that we could have put into these reports. We were worried that the reports would turn into textbooks, right? That's not the idea of these reports. And there was a huge amount of text that was written and then got taken out. We had a lot of text, for instance, in the state of drinking water report on new emerging contaminants. And then we realized it was turning into a textbook, so it came out. So the idea was to raise these issues. Things like climate change are hugely important, but the report was not the place to go into a huge amount of detail. And especially because in many cases, we don't even know yet, it's only starting to become clear what the impact of climate change might be on something like hand hygiene, So the point of the report was just to make the point that these were important things to look at. I would have loved to have gone into biodiversity and, sort of innovative technologies, but the whole idea was to keep the reports as short and strong as sweet, short and sweet as possible. I think coming back to Mohammed's point about we know what to do. So yeah, the technical problems, we know what to do and the resources are there. And so it's this idea that creating the political will, creating the openness to adopt some of these new ways of doing business, that was the really important, the important thing that would come out of this. And to be able to measure that success, I think also coming back to this point about how we would know what we were saying in the report was working, I would like to think that it's not so much a set of rules that is set out by WHO and UNICEF and the World Bank that then countries feel they have to comply with that. These should be things that would be internalized within countries. And one of the things that I would really love to see as an indicator that the report had an impact is that countries would read about other country experience in the case studies and go to those countries and say, please help us. We really like what you did here in reducing non-revenue water. Tell us how you did it. And that we would get much more peer-to-peer exchange between countries.
That's gonna be your key takeaway as
No,
well.
that-
There you
I'm
go.
done.
So let's move across the panel. Key takeaways for the audience to record. If they're gonna remember one thing from today, let alone this week, what's it gonna be?
Well, I think this idea of going into UN 2023, we need partnership and alignment. We have less resources in the sector. And I think with everything else that's going on in the world, that pot is shrinking. And so it's really, really important that the sector comes together to focus our efforts and to really know that what we're doing is affecting change in countries. So I think it's just this focus on partnership and alignment.
Thank you. Mohammed, same question.
For me, the takeaway is for us to really look at any decision we make is to really be guided by evidence. For us as a world sector, most of the things that really affecting us, like in our country, we make decisions based on assumption, we make decisions based on friends. And these things has not been helping us. Let us be guided by evidence. Whatever we are doing, let us get information that will really guide us to make those decisions. And that has been disturbing us so much. So if we want to move forward, let us be guided by information.
Thank you. Jonathan.
Thank you. This is to each of us individually, but also to the politicians. We need to ask ourselves, where do we spend our money on? If you think of just three things, where we spend our money on. Then on the other side, what three things do we need to survive? Do the three match? So we have the resources, but I think we don't have the resolve to solve the water supply issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Malaku.
Thank you. Well, okay. Yeah. I think for me, we need to find also a balance. For instance, NGOs are expected to support the system, strengthening the system rather than went into implementation. But if you see a country like Ethiopia, where we have more than 110 million people, the government could not support all or provide all the infrastructures that the community is in need. So there has to be a balance. That's what I.
Great.
So we need to also implement, at the same time, support the system.
And the last word with you, Caroline.
He said what I was going to say. I was going to say, get behind the system. Yeah, I think it is about really all of us getting behind the systems thinking and building the local structures that plan, that coordinate, and getting behind that. Maybe the very last thing is we need to be aware, particularly as development partners and donors and INGOs, of the impact and the influence we have. And we need to be more conscious of the good, maybe sometimes also the bad we can do, and really work with the local government and local partners to make sure we cover everybody.
Thank you. So I think what we should do is sort of thank our panelists for their contributions. We've heard a number of themes here that I think you're going to come across during the course of this week: government leadership, targeting policy, thinking about incentives for institutional change. How do you make these higher level recommendations tractable at the national level? What do we do around advocacy? How do we seek to use these moments in time for stock taking as something that helps influence these bigger structures that are happening at the international policy level? So I want you to sort of go away and obviously reflect on those, think about them, bring that into your discussions this week. I do recommend that you get hold or download those state of reports if you haven't done so already. They're a really good read. They're also short, pithy summary documents. And I think that they also give you good, tangible examples of how the acceleration framework, which we've talked about various points today, relates to each of those sectors. So I think that that's where we're going to close today. I'm going to ask the panelists to move back down to their seats. I think there's one or two other things that we need to do. And I'm Kader. Should I introduce the video? We wanted to ask the panelists to move down. We're going to have a short video intervention to memorialize a colleague of many of us who unfortunately passed away unexpectedly this year, Mark Pascoe. Some of you may know him. I worked with Mark when I was at the International Water Association. He was a larger-than-life character and a formidable WASH professional. And there is a video message from Regina Sauter, one of her colleagues, close colleagues, to to talk a little bit about the life and the impact that Mark had.
Hello, participants of the Water and Health Conference 2022. Thank you for taking a moment to recognise the recent passing of Mark Pascoe. My name is Regina Suter, and I worked alongside Mark at the International Water Centre. He was also my friend. Mark was the founding CEO of International Water Centre, which was a first of its kind centre in Australia, bringing together researchers, professionals and practitioners from across academia and industry to work collaboratively. As our leader, Mark's focus on the people side of the water sector influence on our culture ways of working. He was always encouraging and seeking out collaborations across institutions and disciplines and influencing it to be transparent and genuine. Mark encouraged authentic partnerships where everyone has a voice and value to gain. I think Mark innately had a love of supporting people to develop their skills, knowledge and experience, but I suspect this was reinforced by Mark's long career in bridging organisations. Before the International Water Centre, Mark was Deputy Director of the International Water Association and President of the Australian Water Association. So although Mark was trained as a water chemist and had managed the water and sanitation services of Brisbane's utility, he spent most of his career in organisations that championed and facilitated cooperation for sustainable development and water management. Mark often talked about the challenges we have in solving the complex water problems we face, but that he believed that if we pulled together across disciplines and institutions, we can make a positive change to the water lives of many people and the environment. Following Mark's passing, we have received many, many heartfelt messages of sadness and loss from people at all levels of organisations. Mark, it seems, had a gift for not only bringing people together in the spirit of collaboration, but for going out of his way to offer kindness and support to those in the water sector seeking to make a positive change. Although the loss of Mark is deeply felt by many of us in the water sector, he leaves us an important legacy of optimism, genuine collaboration, and support for our colleagues. If he were here, Mark would ask you to take this opportunity of having come together at the Water and Health Conference to find more ways and more opportunities to work together, to have new conversations and form new ideas to improve our water world. Vale, Mark Pascoe.
Thank you to Regina Suter, who submitted those remarks and that tribute to Mark. And thank you to Mark for your dedication and contribution to solving some complex WASH problems around the world, and for your dedication and your life well lived. I'm going to send you off to lunch shortly. I know that it's a dangerous position to be standing between you and the buffet line, but I want to make a couple of announcements. Today we have some lunch sessions, and so if you plan to go to a lunch session, if you would get into the express line at the buffet and make your way to the different rooms as soon as you can. We have a lunch gathering in the Trillium Ballroom for Water Institute and ESE alumni. And we have a toolkit session that will be in the Sunflower Room. And we have Careers in WASH. And we have David Berendez and Esther Shaler today sharing their career experience. And so feel free, if you're a young professional or even a mature professional, to go and listen to them talk about their work and their careers. I just want to remind you that we will be having some field trips on Friday. So if you're still with us, please go and sign up at the Water Institute table for a tour to the water treatment plant, as well as the wastewater treatment plant in Carborough. And then we also have a tour of the EPA Household Energy Cook Stove Research Lab. And so those will be happening on Friday from 1 to 3:30. And again, thanks to our sponsors to make this conference possible. And this outro is provided by Sylvia. And send you off to a good lunch, everybody. Everybody wave to the virtual folks. And we'll say good afternoon.
Anak yang manis, janganlah dicium, sayang kalau dicium merah pipinya. Kampunan jauh di mata, kunwang san segaku milian, takkan aja kawan-kawan nalamu, sangke basuh yang surian. Indonesia dengan ini menyatakan kemerdekaan Indonesia. Hal-hal yang mengenai pemindahan kekuasaan dan lain-lain diselenggarakan dengan cara yang sama dan dalam tempo yang sesingkat-singkatnya. Jakarta, 17 Agustus 1945. Soekarno Hatta.